It is my great pleasure to introduce my friend and collaborator and co-conspirator, Brittany Polat. Brittany is a philosophical writer who focuses on applying the ancient wisdom of Stoicism to modern life. Through her writing, including her popular Substack, Stoicism for Humans, and her work with organizations like Modern Stoicism and Stoic Care, Brittany aims to make Stoicism accessible and relevant to people today. In addition to being a prolific writer on all things Stoicism, Brittany has recently published a 90-day Stoic journal entitled Journal Like a Stoic. You should have a copy of that. This book provides actual practical exercises and prompts to help readers live with greater mindfulness, equanimity, and purpose. I really do like that book. I'm telling you, it's a favorite of mine. So let me go finish this introduction. Though her background is in applied linguistics, having earned a PhD in the subject, Brittany found her passion in studying and sharing Stoic philosophy. She is someone who believes Stoicism has much to teach us about how to live virtuous, meaningful lives. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Brittany Polat. I'll do this. I've got their applause and my applause all tied together.
All right. Thank you, Phil.
You're welcome. And I'm going to pull my spotlight off and poof, and you should be sharing the screen. All right, my friend, you've got it. Tell people about good emotions, because I'm one of those cats that thought Stoics weren't supposed to have emotions. No, I didn't think that, but you're going to fix it.
Well, a lot of people do think that because we often talk about eliminating the bad emotions in Stoicism, right? A lot of people actually are drawn to Stoicism because of the promise of the therapy of the passions, right? Getting rid of anger or fear, guilt, anxiety. We talk a lot about those bad emotions. And I think those get all the focus in Stoicism. But actually, we're also about good emotions. So Stoicism is not only, the goal of Stoicism is not about living an emotionless life. Emotions are an important part of the human experience. I mean, think about some of the strong, powerful, positive emotions that you felt. So we don't want to get rid of all of these. What we want to do is be wise about our emotions. And we do this by correcting our judgments about the world, by developing a more, you might say, mature understanding of what's important in life and the way that the world is, and learning to kind of roll with that and find beauty in what's around us. So the goal of Stoicism is not eliminating all emotions, but improving our emotional experience. So a lot of times this improvement takes the form of, yes, getting rid of all of those negative emotions. But the way that we do this is by bringing ourselves into alignment with our reasoned understanding of the world, or virtue, you might say. We talk a lot about virtue or reason. So all of this is part of a well-lived, meaningful life. Again, not getting rid of emotions. Emotions are an important part of being human. They make us who we are, but we're perfecting them. So the ancient Stoics talked a lot about completing or perfecting ourselves through virtue. So this is what we want to do. We just want to become a better version of ourselves. And this goes along with the goal of eudaimonia. Excuse me, sorry, creaky voice this morning, eudaimonia. So this is a condition in which a person of excellent character is living optimally well, flourishing, doing admirably, and steadily enjoying the best mindset that is available to human beings. I love this description. This is from Tony Long. This is a wonderful book on Epictetus. If you're into this kind of thing, I strongly recommend it. Excellent book. But I love his description here of eudaimonia. A lot of times today, we talk about happiness, but it's kind of a fleeting emotion. It comes and goes. If we get a promotion at work, we say we're happy, we're elated, or we're joyful. Or if we're on a vacation, or if we get a scoop of ice cream with sprinkles on top, we say we're happy, right? And all this is not true happiness according to the Greek ideal. So in the Greek ideal, happiness is more of a mindset or a condition. So it's not something that's external. It doesn't depend on external events, right? Then you're on a roller coaster all the time. That's what causes the negative emotions. So if something that you don't like happens to you, you're automatically going to feel angry about that, or frustrated, or guilty, or fearful, or any of these other negative emotions. But if instead you think about, what's important in life is my character, then you have much more of an internal sense of happiness. It doesn't come and go. You're not on that roller coaster all the time. It's inside of you. So this is what we're going for. So again, the bad emotions are based on faulty judgments. These are faulty emotions. They're kind of like emotions that have gone wrong. So they're based on, they're uncontrollable and overpowering. So you can kind of think of two big components of emotions: the emotional tenor, the experience. So the bad emotions, think about it. When you're angry, you're under the sway of anger, you feel like you really can't control yourself, right? You can't control your actions. It's like you're just being compelled to do things. You're compelled to scream or shout or something like that. You literally can't control yourself. So one of the components of the bad emotions is that they're uncontrollable and overpowering. So that's kind of the experience that we feel. The other component is what they're based on. So it's based on a faulty understanding of what's important in life. So if someone insults you and you think that it's really important what that person thinks of you, you're automatically going to get angry because your judgment is leading to that emotion. However, if you don't think that person's opinion of you really matters much, you're not going to get angry about it. You have no reason to get angry. So a lot of times these negative emotions are tied to faulty or incorrect judgments about the world. So what we want to do is adopt an accurate outlook on life. And by accurate, we mean proper judgment, right? What's important, what really matters. It's our virtue, right? And our understanding of the world and our ability to interact successfully with other people. So all of this leads to a reduction of the bad emotions. And guess what? Once those bad emotions are out of the way, it leaves space for the good emotions. It's kind of like a flowering of good emotions, right? If you pull all the weeds out of your garden, you have more room to nurture the plants that you do want to grow. So we allow more space for those good emotions to blossom. So the good emotions, as I mentioned earlier, technically, these are only experienced by the sage. The sage is completely wise and has perfected her judgment about the world, right? She has kind of an interlocking system of perfect judgments about everything. Now, none of us are sages. The ancient Stoics themselves never claimed to be sages. Zeno, Chrysippus, Marcus Aurelius, they did not think of themselves as sages. In fact, the sage is so rare that she comes along maybe once every 500 years or so, right? So technically speaking, good emotions are only experienced by the sage. But for the rest of us, we can use this as a guide. We can get a lot closer and we can think about, all right, so if this is the goal, this is what the perfectly wise person would experience, how close can we get to this? So this is how I think about good emotions. How close can we get to these perfected emotions? So these emotions are based on a true understanding of what's important in life. Again, we're correcting our judgment. We're thinking about what really matters. And it's not wealth or social status or anything external to us. It's fulfilling our potential as a human, right? For rationality, for love, for sociability, for all of these things that really make us who we are as a human. By fulfilling these capacities, this is what brings on our good emotions. So some examples that the ancient Stoics gave are joy, goodwill, cherishing, welcoming, these really, really strong positive emotions. Think about how powerful those are. Joy, goodwill, very, very strong. Again, looking at the two components that we talked about with negative emotions, the emotional tenor. With negative emotions, you feel like you're out of control, right? Being pulled around. With the good emotions, you feel stable, consistent. These are under our voluntary control because it's born of our own reason. So whereas when we're angry or fearful, we're being pulled around. With the good emotions, it's something that we decide for ourselves. We create our own joy, so to speak. So you've got the component of the emotional tenor, which is stable, and it's based on rationality. So not faulty understanding of the world, but a perfected understanding of the world. And again, we could say that this is more similar to an attitude or a mindset than a feeling that comes and goes. And because it's more similar to an attitude, it's something that we can really cultivate within ourselves. We can work on these inner mindsets and inner attitudes. We can choose this. We're not pulled around by things external to us, but it's something that we cultivate and develop inside. So I just want to share this quote with you from Seneca. This is kind of a good, just brief example of what the ancient Stoics were talking about. So in his letters on ethics, Seneca says, "Do this above all, dear Lucilius. Learn how to experience joy. Do you now suppose that because I am removing from you the things of fortune, that I am taking away many pleasures? Not at all. What I want is that gladness should never be absent from you. I want it to be born in your own home, and that is what will happen if it comes to be inside of you." So again, all of these things that we've been talking about, this happiness comes from within. It's something that you create for yourself, no matter what your external circumstances are. If you're facing illness or hardship or anything like that, you still have the possibility to experience these good emotions. And this is something that's really powerful. As we all know, in everyday life, we face many challenges. We're never going to have a perfect world around us or a perfect life, but we can still experience or work toward experiencing these good emotions. Okay, so that's it for my brief presentation. We're going to talk a lot more about this, but that's kind of the more theoretical introduction. And of course, this is just a very brief overview. There's much more that we could delve into. I would strongly recommend, I think maybe this was sent out to some of you, if you are really into Stoicism, you'd like to know more about this book by Margaret Graver, Stoicism and Emotion. Literally, Margaret Graver wrote the book on Stoicism and Emotion. So this has pretty much everything you would want to know at a theoretical level. It's not practical, it's very academic. So if you're just getting into Stoicism, I wouldn't recommend this book, but it's excellent if you are ready to explore a little bit further in Stoicism. And as for me, you can find me at, as Phil mentioned, my new Substack, Stoicism for Humans, or stoicare.com. This is a nonprofit where we share Stoicism as a philosophy of care with caregivers and anybody who could benefit from it. So thank you everyone for listening. It's great to be here with you today, and I look forward to your questions and your discussion.
Thank you. Brittany, how did we get, I think we've got some ideas, but how do we get this wrong? I think so many people fail to think that we ought to be finding some ways to experience good emotions. And in fact, it makes us more sage-like. I'm all for that. I need to be more sage-like.
Yeah, it's a really big misinterpretation in contemporary Stoicism. And it wasn't this way in ancient Stoicism. So I think it's one of those things, people kind of lost touch with Stoicism over the centuries. And then when you just pick up Epictetus and start reading it without really understanding the context he was working in or some of the existing Stoic theory, it's kind of hard to piece it all together properly. So I think maybe that's where some of the misunderstandings came from. But yeah, the negative emotions do tend to get all the attention.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, or at least let me just say this from my perspective, I'm projecting this on all of these people. They seem like nice people. Let's just assume they came to Stoicism the way that I came to Stoicism, which is I'm looking for a way to control the negative emotions. I don't want to feel bad. I don't want to be depressed. I don't want to be sad. I don't want to be angry. I want to be a good human being. And so, I started off by thinking, well, let me figure out how to get rid of the anger side of this. Let's get that piece under control. And you get that. But I will say that it wasn't until, I came across these ideas, I came across, Margaret Graver saying, look, this is time for us to think about how we deal with emotions and actually emphasize some positive things for us.
Yeah, I guess the negative emotions are very salient. They jump out at us. So it is important to get those under control first. The longer I've practiced Stoicism, though, the more important it becomes to kind of see that goal of the positive emotions. Again, once you start kind of reducing those negative emotions, what comes in to take their place? You don't want to vacuum, right? You don't want to be emotionless. Right. So what are we actually working towards? And I think it's exciting in modern Stoicism, in this community right here, what we're doing today, we are kind of feeling our way forward. We're thinking about what this would look like in the 21st century. We don't really have a template for that. So it's really exciting to me that we can think about, what do the good emotions look like in the 21st century? So I'm hoping that our conversation today can kind of move that forward a little bit.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. Okay, I think we could probably take a question or two from the audience. I see one hand raised. I see one in the chat. So I'm going to take a couple more. If you want to raise a hand, we'll do that. Let's take this one out of the chat first. Larry asks, is there a danger in delving too deeply into the good emotions and losing oneself? What's the negative side of being positive, I think is the question.
Well, in Stoicism, it's a little bit different if you're comparing it maybe to Buddhism, where, people are lost in contemplation. You're spending a lot of time in meditation on the mat, that kind of thing. Stoicism is all about interacting with other people. So as we perfect our emotions, we actually grow closer to other people. We become more social and not less, which is a little bit maybe counterintuitive, because other people can be such a source of, frustration and negative emotions. But when we learn to interact wisely with other people, we learn to not let our happiness depend on what they do, but to cultivate those feelings of goodwill, good wishing, good intent, cherishing, appreciation, gratitude. All of these are things that we can generate ourselves towards other people. And those very, very strongly positive pro-social emotions, they make us feel more connected to others, not less. So in contrast to maybe some types of contemplative philosophy where you're kind of distancing yourself from others, or you're getting lost in your own head or something like that, Stoicism is the opposite. It was well known in antiquity for being a very social philosophy. So does that answer your question, Larry?
No, I think that's absolutely right. And I guess, I think there's probably, we think there might be some risk. I mean, like, we want to be positive, we want to be good, we want this, as you say, be pro-social. And I'm trying to figure out, if I'm not very sophisticated in my thinking, how do I differentiate that from being manic in my approach? And that was that part where you said, I want to be stable as I'm doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's that piece you're going to. All right, we got a couple questions from the audience. I see Jack has a hand raised. I see Ron has a hand raised. Maybe we'll take these and then we'll do something else. So let's start with Jack first. Jack, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Can you hear me?
I think we can. Sounds good.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Just a quick observation. I'm fairly novice to intermediate in this, but it's really made an impact on my life in a short period of time. And one of the observations I have is Stoicism, especially today, seems to be very, very countercultural. So if you look at society at large, the culture we're in, it's kind of a very reactive stimulus response, instant gratification, dopamine hit kind of society. And Stoicism to me is the exact opposite of that. It's control, it's measured responses, it's being, thoughtful, it's being aware, it's accepting situations that you're in, not reacting to them. And it just seems to be that it's just almost in some ways the opposite of the cultural environment we're living in. I think that makes it even more important. But my question would be is as I've been doing this, I find that, and it seems to be you go through a transition when you're kind of transitioning. And I was a pretty reactive individual prior to trying to do these daily practices. And you go through this transition. I'm finding I'm kind of going through this transition where I've kind of receded a bit from, not totally from social interactions, but I'm handling my social interactions a lot better, but I'm also limiting the ones that I know kind of cause me stress. So I'm drawing more boundaries. I'm not interacting any more than I have to with individuals or situations that I know aren't good for me. So there's kind of that aspect of it, but I'm not withdrawing. I wouldn't say I'm withdrawing. And but I do feel I'm going kind of through like a bit of a numb stage, right? I'm not as reactive as I used to be, but at the same time, I'm kind of, things that used to bother me a lot, they don't, but I'm also kind of not, I wouldn't say I've hit that, what you call a joy stage. I'm trying to get to that like fulfillment, trying to find something, and Brittany, I think it's amazing that you found this path in your life, this purpose where you're using Stoicism to impact other people's lives. Because that's, as I started Stoicism, I'm thinking that's something I'd like to really get towards. But so that's my question is there like really it seems to be there's a transition, and any hints or advice on how to manage that transition if you're going from, what you were before, in my case, a pretty reactive kind of up and down individual to kind of more measured, in control of yourself, in control of your responses, more aware, more accepting of things, more service oriented as well. So any hints on that would be helpful. Thanks.
So just to jump into that, I think you're right. Absolutely. Stoicism is very countercultural, and not even so much just on a non-reactive level, but also on the level of values. I think that's where it's the most countercultural. Stoicism is all about, it's orienting ourselves toward virtue, to choosing something different to value rather than material acquisition or wealth or these kinds of things. As we know, those are preferred indifference. So there are advantages in appropriate ways. It's nice to have them, but they're not our source of happiness. They're not the most important thing. So I think Stoicism is very countercultural in that way. And to respond to your kind of feeling of numbness or emptiness, that's not what we want. So I think you're right. That's a transition stage, but we want to kind of build in those, positive emotions instead of just having emptiness. That's not good. That could lead to depression or something like that. So I think you're ready to really start working on cultivating those positive mindsets. So I have some examples from Marcus Aurelius. Not sure, Phil, we're going to share some of those later, I think. I can share some of those quotes for you. But the meditations will be your friend. Marcus Aurelius constantly talks about loving other people and cultivating. One of his best quotes, I think, is where he's talking about appreciating the virtues of the people around you. Spend some time thinking about this person that you're close to. What's great about them? What inspires you? What do you love about them? Why do you want to spend more time with them? You mentioned that you're withdrawing from some of the problematic relationships or people in your life. And I think that's fine to an extent. Epictetus recommends that. He says you're going to have to leave behind some of your old friends if they're drawing you back into your old negative habits, that kind of thing. So I think that is appropriate as long as we replace them with other really strong, positive relationships.
Yeah, thank you for that. Let's take one more. We got Ron has his hand raised as well. I'm going to ask Ron to unmute and see if he can't share a question with us.
Thank you for calling on me. Hi, Brittany. I have a question about the social aspects. So one of the main ideas of Stoicism is focusing on what you can control rather than what you can't. And so you cannot control what other people think about you or how they feel about you. So what I'm asking is, how do you balance the fact of being interested in other people and caring about relationships and wanting other people to like you, with the fact that you cannot control that? And also, there's a big focus in Stoicism on rationality, but rationality is based on conceptual frameworks, which could be not the actual reality of things. It's how we look at things from our conditioning. In Buddhism, they look more at the illusions of how we look at things. So I wonder if and if you could also say something about virtue, because people think of virtue as being good, and it might have a more different meaning in Stoicism. So those are three aspects of how do you deal with other people and how they feel about you. And anyway, if you can respond to any of these questions, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's a lot going on in those questions. I think that's actually 6 questions. But yeah, you're right. So the dichotomy of control gets a lot of attention in Stoicism, especially when you're first starting out in Stoicism. A lot of people, the dichotomy of control is something you can grasp and start implementing right away. and that's great. But really what we're aiming more for is virtue, which you just mentioned. Virtue is based on both rationality and sociability. So somehow sociability kind of gets left out a lot of times. I'm not sure why, because it's also another pillar of being human. We are rational, but we are also social, and we are social in a rational way, and we are rational in a social way. They are completely intertwined. So I can't spend a lot of time talking about this today, but I did a talk in, was it 2021, Stoicon 2021, on how do Stoics care, which is on the Modern Stoicism YouTube channel. So if you want to delve more deeply into that, that's a whole 20-minute talk that might give you a little bit more background information. So maybe look that up. Yeah, as far as learning how to care about other people without making your happiness depend on them, it's learning to care wisely. It's very hard. It's not easy. Nobody's ever going to say it's easy, but it's something that we can work towards, and we can make progress toward it, about loving others without depending on them, on their good opinion, or, being upset if they leave us or something like that. So it's very complicated, very difficult, but it can be done. And that is something that we work towards as Stoics.
Yeah, and the thing is, you pointed this out already, but I mean, Marcus struggled with this, right? I mean, he was trying to figure this out, and he said he's, if you think about each of these things that he's writing, he's talking to himself, right? And he says, remember, they don't know what you know, right? He's saying they don't understand the difference between good and evil. They don't understand right and wrong the way you understand it, and this is why they are that way. And that is his vision of the world, right? So he wants to help these people. He wants to interact sociably, but he also realizes that not everyone else is on the same page as him, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. This is wonderful. Lots of great questions in the chat. And we'll get back to some of these more later. But the thing is, part of what we're trying to do here is to get everyone here talking to each other, right? And so let's grab a question and start making that happen. Let's get you into the room. So let's talk about what we're going to do here. This is maybe a little bit different than what you're expecting. So let me tell you what the rules are and how this works. I'm going to take you and put you in a small room of folks, just a few people, somewhere between 3 and 5, depending on how we count this out. You're going to be in that room for 12 minutes. This is an exploratory thing, right? So I don't know who this is going to be, and you don't know who it's going to be, but you don't have to worry about that part of it. What we're going to do is we're going to give you a question to talk about while you're in there. So first off, let me give you that question, because you say, well, this is a great way to meet people. And yes, we want to be a great way to meet people, but we're going to start you with a question. And this one's just a little bit long. I'll put it inside the chat, and now you've got it. So we're going to say, in this small group of people, we want you to choose one of the emotions that we've talked about today: joy, goodwill, cherishing, being welcoming, or cheerfulness. And what does that look like in your life, right? How can you make this happen more for yourself is the question. And we're going to go around inside these groups, and each person's going to take a turn answering this question. We'll have you in there for about 12 minutes or so. Brittany, is there anything, do you have any other comments about this particular question before we get folks aimed at it?
Yeah, we didn't have time to talk a lot about what these would look like. So this is something you can discuss with your group mates. What does it look like to have joy that's stable and born in your own home, to use Seneca's term? Once again, it's not dependent on external things. I saw some questions earlier about, hey, how is joy any different from anger? And the reason is because it's your own mindset. It's coming from inside you. It's something you cultivate for yourself. It's not based on external things. Okay. So just keep that in mind. All of these things, goodwill, cherishing, cheerfulness, they're not dependent on other things. They're dependent on you and your mindset. So maybe just keep that in mind as you're talking about this question.
Yeah. So, and when we're in the breakout rooms, a couple of things that we would tell you about this too is that, this is a chance for you to share how this works for you. We're not coaches. We're not in there coaching each other about how we should live our life. We're not offering advice or those kind of things, because that gets a little weird. We don't want to do that. So talk to us about what your experience is. Share your experience. So I've decided today we're going to put you in rooms of roughly 4 people. But math. It won't be exactly that way, but you'll be in roughly 4 people inside of a room. You're going to be in there for 12 minutes. The first question you're going to have is, who goes first? And my rule is the longest hair in the room goes first. Oh my goodness, Phil, why? I'll explain that some other time. Longest hair goes first. But again, be nice, help move this conversation along. There'll be a clock at the top of the screen to kind of show you the 12 minutes elapsing. So you get a sense of all of that. I think this hopefully, this will make a little sense to you, but start with a question, go around and answer the question, then go around and do introductions. You've got time in the past. Keep track of the clock at the top of the screen. And the last thing I will tell you before I ask permission to put you into these rooms is, if you can't see, can't hear, something gets weird, hit the leave room button and you come back out and talk to me. But I'll just be out here in the lobby trying to make sure everything is working for you. So what I need from you, I hope I've done a good job here of explaining to you that this is a thing and we're running an experiment and you're going to come in there and hopefully have a chance to meet some people. At the minimum, just be indifferent. How about that? Okay, so all I need from you is some indication that you're okay with what's about to happen to you. That usually looks like a thumbs up, but it could be a dance move. It could be a wink, but I'm about to toss you into a room for 12 minutes. I will see you back here when it's done, and you can talk to me about the experience, talk to me about what you saw and learned and heard. We'll see you here in 12 minutes. 3, 2, 1. There you go. All right, people. Hello, nice people. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. And let's see if I've got this right. And by the way, we're at 40 some seconds as we're waiting for everybody to come back from the breakout rooms. But if I'll tell you what, if you could see and you could hear and you had conversations inside your breakout room, give me some sign. Give me some sign that it kind of worked. I mean, I'm not saying it was spectacular, but it worked, right? I could see, I could hear, I had conversations. That's what I'm looking for. All right. Anybody want to share an experience, talk about something that happened inside that breakout room? I'd love to hear a story or two. Raise your hand so I know to unmute you. And it's, by the way, about the only way I can find you is if you raise your hand. But if I could get a couple hands raised, people to be willing to share a story about something that happened inside their room, I would like to get a couple of stories out of there. And I see Dan and Noriega. Maybe I get a couple more here, but talk to us about what is going on inside there. Let's start with Dan and ask Dan to unmute. All right, there you go.
Yeah, thanks. In brief, room number 2 talked about how happiness is more than just emphasizing the positive emotions in life and trying to reduce the negatives. It's also understanding that life can be turbulent, like a roller coaster. And so happiness can also take the form of trying to smooth that out and live a more tranquil life, thinking about our choices better. And I mentioned on that topic Seneca's letter 59, which talks about that the happy life can be a tranquil life. I'm paraphrasing Seneca, but that's it from room 2.
Super. Thank you, Dan. And Seneca will let you get away with that. All right. Orlando, I'm going to ask you to unmute and share with us some things you might have heard.
First of all, Phil, thank you for that group. It was an amazing conversation. We were trying to understand how emotions inform us, and sometimes how hard it is for us to ignore that information. So we were trying to go back to the point of avoiding reacting to everything and trying to be a little bit more understanding of our own natures as the biological machinery we have. So that was kind of the point there. Try to understand how to pause emotions if possible.
Yeah, I love that. Orlando, I think, I feel like when I've got this like Stoicism thing figured out, like I'm not the sage, right? I'm a struggler like everybody else, but I'm a struggler. But there are days where I feel like I've gotten it right. And it just feels like an unfair advantage, doesn't it? It's like when you see people like being chaotic and shambolic all around you, and then you think, okay, that's just the way they're going to be. And I'm going to be okay with them being that way because that's just not me today. That's cool. It feels like an unfair advantage. Thank you for sharing that. Let's see. Jonathan is up. I've got a hand. Let's do it.
Hey, yeah, Phil, I agree with you on that. Like when it's going good and you see everybody else reacting around you, you do feel like it's an unfair advantage when it's going well. There's ups and downs. But our room, we talked about a few of the different positive emotions, but cherishing came up and gratitude. And we did talk about like having gratitude for the world around us and the small and large and big things. And then we also talked a little bit about reflecting on things that may upset us, and then trying to remind ourselves that it's our judgment about those things that are upsetting us, not the things themselves. So through our conversation, we were going to flush that out and bring that up.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear Epictetus was in your room. It sounds like brought that principle right forward. I love it. All right, one more, Dina. I'm gonna ask, actually, Dina's cheating. There's two people on that screen, so we're gonna get in stereo.
Yeah, I raised the hand there. I'm Tim. And the thing that I find really powerful is the whole learning process, right? You start off, you're not doing it right, and you learn something about Stoicism. You're like, that's what I did wrong. And then you have a moment, however long after that, you have a moment where you do it right. And like you said, Phil, it feels like you've got this superpower that nobody else has. Someone's trying to stir you up and throw you off balance, and they completely fail. And then you go back to your normal, like sometimes get it right, sometimes get it wrong, but you have that moment that you can come back to. And, I mean, as non-sages, we have that sort of pride and that like, oh, other people were impressed. These are non-Stoic things, but they can motivate us to come back to that thing that gave us that moment of a glimpse of maybe what the sage would do. And I find that's really helpful because it can kind of help lift us from stage to stage as we move towards that sagehood.
Yeah, no, you know what? That is very thoughtful. Thank you for bringing that forward. And the thing is, maybe some of the times I'm just comparing my current behavior with my old behavior given the same situation, right? And the old me wasn't quite as strong as that, right? And the new me has got this figured out a little bit. And of course, the new me still makes plenty of mistakes, but I just feel better for having made the progress, right? I'm progressing, I'm struggling, I'm moving forward. I love that. Thank you, Tim, for sharing that with us. All right, I'm gonna let Brittany explain the question.
Of course. So this time we're looking at a quote from Seneca, who wrote many things about good emotions, and this is one of them. If cheerfulness is to endure, one must rejoice in one's own resources. All ordinary objects of longing are in flux, this way and that. Fortune's gifts are not ours to keep. Okay, so Seneca again is drilling down into this idea that we can't put our happiness in outside external things, whether it's money or social status or the things that other people do. Fortune's gifts are not ours to keep. So how can we incorporate this idea of cheerfulness? This is a good emotion, rejoicing, and then maybe some other things as well, gratitude. How can we incorporate these things into our lives to help us reap the rewards of good emotions?
That was perfectly said. I've got nothing to add to it other than Brittany did a fabulous job of explaining how do we do this bit. Okay, same thing, 12 minutes, roughly 5 people in the rooms this time, because I think that might be a little bit better number. We'll see. 12 minutes, 5 people. It's actually 13 minutes. Did you guys figure that out? It's 12 minutes plus 60 seconds to come back. So you can use all of that time if you want. All I need from you is some sign that you are okay with what's about to happen to you in a brand new room full of people. Thumbs up would be the best sign ever, but I'll take a dance move. I'll take a wink. I'll take a nod. Don't stick your tongue out. I don't know what that does. All right, friends, I will see you back here in 12 minutes. Same rules as before. Can't see, can't hear. Something gets weird. Come see me and I'll take care of you. Boom. There you go. Join the room. Press the join room button. Greetings. All right, so let's do this bit first. You could see, you could hear, you had a conversation. Look at that. Lydia says, an amazing conversation.
I'm here. Can you hear me now? Do I pop up closer to the top?
That's exactly what happens. Once you get unmuted, you can talk. It's up at the top. Well, let's start with what an amazing conversation. We like it when people say
it was
that.
so
Talk
good.
to us about that. Tell us what you heard.
Orlando, we started off as gratitude is just it's the more you are grateful for things, the more things that you are grateful for happen or show up in your life. So it's kind of a mindset. And then it got into a really fascinating discussion about whether gratitude, can you have an attitude of gratitude without believing in any Stoic gods, God, anyone like this? And how do you make it not an egotistical or self-centered thing, like I am grateful? And so it was just this fantastic conversation. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the names of the other, Wayne and Orlando. And there was another one who was just fantastic about gratitude as a mindset rather than a reaction. If you go into the world with Ron, yeah, there we go. Thanks, Orlando. Go into the world with gratitude as a mindset, as a state of being, rather than a reaction to everything. It was fantastic. We could have definitely kept going. So appreciate Wayne and Ron and Orlando for that one.
Yeah, that just sounds great. I'm glad that all that energy came out. And that's a thing, one of the reasons we're doing this, right, is, I mean, we hear sometimes from people infrequently that they actually get to hang out in other groups of like-minded Stoic individuals, but we don't normally get to do that. But here we are with fellow travelers jumping together from all over the globe, jumping into a room, being able to have a quick conversation about what's possible, right, in this space. So that is awesome, Lydia. And maybe if you hang around a little bit, we can get you to tell us more of your tale, by the way. There's a story that I still want to hear from you about your adventures. All right, Dan, I'm going to get to you, but I'm going to start here with Joseph because I'm trying to get a couple of fresh voices in here as well. But tell us about things that went on inside your room. Joseph, let me start with you.
We had a very good discussion. We discussed a little bit about how premeditating on the potential loss of somebody, how that can facilitate gratitude in the sense that, thinking about individuals that we have lost or could lose, and so that it cultivates a certain appreciation for the individuals that we do have in our lives at this particular moment in time. Also, one of the kind of overriding themes of both breakout rooms that I was in was about the pro-social aspect of things, is where we kind of discussed seeing the inherent worth of each individual that we're actually interacting with. And by seeing that, we're kind of, seeing the good in somebody else. And by, we're actually grateful for the interactions that we do have, and we actually learn from those interactions as well, by how we start to view one person. It's a specific example. A person who was a judge making decisions about somebody is often looking at that we're only seeing a snapshot about what that person's going through and not judging the act, and looking for what the inherent worth of that individual. And by doing that, there's a certain level of gratitude that can be cultivated. Those are some of the things. Listening is the other thing that I think is really one of the most important things, as well as journaling, and kind of recognizing ourselves when we're actually hearing what other people are saying. So, we can cultivate gratitude from there. All right, I haven't talked too long, sorry.
No, well, the thing is, I love it. I love hearing all of these ideas coming up in the room. I'm glad that it did that. And I think it's really strong. I love hearing all of that. And, I think that appreciating the people around us, I think it's a thing that's just easy to kind of become inured to that. And we don't do it. And Stoicism has really got some really specific advice on how to express that gratitude. Okay, I think I will get you out of here at 11:30, but I will drag the end as well, is what we call. So there'll be an official end at 11:30 for anyone who said, hey, Phil, you said you'd start on time and end on time. I'm going to do that. But then I will also take additional Q&A. We had a bunch of stuff in the chat we never got to. We'd like to come back. And then I'm going to go to Sasha first and ask Sasha to unmute. And Sasha, talk to us about what you heard your room. Do that now. I get you. Yeah, I'm gonna press the mute.
Hello. Hi.
Yeah. Give me this in 2 minutes because we're kind of close to the bottom.
Okay, yeah, sure. So yeah, I shared how it's being a practicing Stoic has changed, has firstly really put out the distortion of putting value on the external things of life in terms of like wealth and career and status and all of these things that are hard to not compare yourself or feel like, oh, I'm a valuable person because I don't have or I do have those things. So that's pretty much put this very important, it's like readjusted the value of what I have. And then I feel grateful, I feel gratitude because I don't have, wealth and all these things. And now I'm like, okay, I'm able to eliminate the distortion and like sort of like clear the cobwebs or the weeds, as Brittany was saying. I love it to pay attention to what really is valuable. And then there's the gratitude for, I'm grateful to have found the path of Stoicism. I'm grateful to be able to have the opportunity in my life to be able to practice this wisdom, to be able to practice any and all wisdom, to be able to practice what really is important and what really does count. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I love it. And it does. I mean, I said this before, I'm going to say it again. It feels like an unfair advantage when you get a handle on it, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I have got this internal superpower for making a thing happen in my own life. And all I wanted out of this, I came to this for the eudaimonia. I love the virtue, but I came to this for the eudaimonia, and I came to this so that I could flourish. And really, I never heard anybody kind of say that in that way, in a way that really struck my heart until I heard Brittany say it when we started working together back when. It's like, she was about flourishing. I was like, yeah, that's the word. That's what I want to be. I want to be that flourishing cat, right? Okay. We're at the bottom. I'm going to drag the end. So we'll take more questions. We'll do more hands. But for those of you who said, hey, I need to be out of here at a certain time, then we're going to still make sure that works out for you because it's right at 11:30. So before we go, question is, will there be video? Will there be notes? Will there be all that stuff? Yes, we will take care of you. You will get stuff from us because we're the kind of people who will give you more stuff. But before we go, we're all going to say thanks to Brittany Polat for doing this thing that she did with us today, because it's just a gift of her thinking and starting a conversation that starts us to thinking. So I've given you the amazing and awesome power to unmute. I'm going to count you down. And at the end of that, we're all going to say thank you to Brittany. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Go.
Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you,
Brittany.
very much.
Thank you. And Phil, thank you to Phil.
Thank you.
Phil.
Thank
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you,
Phil.
Phil.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
You are good cats, but especially that Brittany Polat. Excellent. Okay, so yes, I think that's fun and funny, and it's great to have us all get a chance to chat with each other. Brittany, you're not in a giant hurry here, so we can take a couple more questions. You all right with that still?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. All right, let's start. Let's see. We did talk to Sasha, so I'm gonna lower that hand just so I remember. And then we're gonna go to Josh and then Dan. All right. First up is Josh.
Yeah, hi everyone. Just about the last exercise, I found it interesting how personal stoicism is, because we were discussing the topic of gratitude, and we all adopted an attitude of gratitude of the different angles. I came to it through memento mori, and then someone else in my group through premeditatio malorum, another one of amor fati. So I found it amazing, and not having the chance on a daily basis to talk about stoicism to anyone, it gets kind of lonely. So it was great. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I'm that cat too, right? I mean, I came, well, I don't want to say I came through memento mori. I came through this wanting to get some things done, but memento mori just kind of, I'm an older person. So for me, it kind of just resonates. This whole idea is like, appreciate this thing in the moment. Remember that I'm not going to be here forever. So I like that a lot. Brittany, what do you think about that?
Yeah, beautiful. It's nice to see you, Josh, and your daughter, a budding Stoic, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, I think Seneca really makes a big deal. We only had a really small clip of this quote, but if you have access to the full letters on ethics, I would encourage you to read that whole letter, because his whole letter is about gratitude and the benefits that accrue from gratitude. So it really is powerful. I mean, Seneca discovered this 2,000 years before all the self-help gurus on Oprah and things like that. So it is powerful.
Yeah, and that was letter 72. I don't know if I might have given that number, but I don't know that I did, but we'll come back. That will show up later in the notes. Dan.
Yeah, thanks. We were in breakout room 14. And when we talked about gratitude, someone made an interesting point. It's unexpected that we should be grateful for the difficulties in our life, for even the disasters that happen. And someone mentioned the example of Admiral James Stockdale, who was a prisoner of war, and how he let that event improve his life, strengthen his character. So we can even be grateful for the terrible things that happen to us. And I encourage people after this event, also look for books like we've mentioned, like James Stockdale's book, Courage Under Fire. Some of these books, Seneca's letters too, they're available as public domain, and you can find them on the internet for free. You can get started right away.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. You know, Donald had said to us one time that Albert Ellis, the guy who invented or came up with rational emotive behavioral therapy, which is a thing before cognitive behavioral therapy, he said that Albert Ellis would actually prescribe to his therapeutic patients letters from Seneca, and he would say, you know, you should read, and he would give them certain letters. Now, I've tried to find that list of which letters he actually worked with, and I don't know which numbers he was doing. But the thing is, there's so much practical advice. I mean, the titles kind of give it away, right? And there's just a lot of practical advice. So, you know, I did a thing to Dan's point. Here is my personal book copy of, and this is the first letters from Seneca. They're not all in this one. It's the however many hundred, or there's 50 in here, right? But if you'll notice what I did in here, I don't know if you can see this, 1 month as a challenge, I took every day, I had a page a day calendar, and I would pull a page out of the calendar. I'd roll a random number between 1 and 50, and I would read that letter and write notes to myself about that letter for that day. And the reason I put my calendar pages down inside of it was so that I wouldn't read the same one twice in a month. And that was just my little reminder, so I would have every different one. Anyway, I think this is great help. It's been awesome for me, and it's at hand, right? I keep it near me all the time. I think it's great stuff. Brittany, of course, Brittany wrote a book on writing your own journals. I mean, that's kind of a thing. I mean, and of course, you were used much more than just Seneca to do that.
Yeah, Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus feature too. But yeah, I've been looking at some of the comments here. We really do have pretty much everything we need from the ancient Stoics. A lot of things that are kind of repackaged today on the self-help shelf are just repetitions of what people have already known, people who are pursuing wisdom. Sometimes you have to be careful because these days you might find some really superficially packaged things. Even in Stoicism, I'm sure everyone here is aware that there are some, you know, Stoic authors who aren't quite as knowledgeable, perhaps, or maybe they're just looking to capitalize on the trend of Stoicism right now. So you can't just trust, you know, every random book on Stoicism that you find, because some people will not feature, maybe they'll pull out the wrong things or they won't explain it properly. But yeah, there are, just make sure you find books that are by authors you've heard of, maybe modern Stoicism authors. I think that's a great place to start until you kind of get a sense of what types of books you'd be interested in. So just be careful when you're looking at different Stoic books to find some by reputable authors.
That is a hard topic, my friend, right there. Like, how do I know where to find that? Where do I go looking for wisdom? What, you know, makes sense? What's just kind of nonsense that's out there? Brittany, I just want to say, do you see Larry has said maybe we can get Brittany to come back and talk about journaling sometime?
Sure, anytime.
I know. And the thing is, you know, everyone's like, oh, Phil's talking up Brittany's book like he's here selling it. I'm not selling the book. I think I love the book more than Brittany loves the book. I just think I love it in hand. I've recommended it to a few friends. And the thing is, there's a thing, I know there's a daily journal, the Daily Stoic that Ryan Holiday has done all that, and that's great too. But the thing I liked about what Brittany has done is it's a 90-day kind of exercise, and so you can kind of run through this, and it's not quite the marathon endurance test that some of these other books are. In this case, it's a chance for you to kind of start playing with this and seeing how it works for you. Anyway, I am a super fan of it, and I'm glad that you did it.
Thank
Like
you.
I said, I enjoy it. Let's see, Brittany, were there other questions that we had inside the chat that you rather liked, or we're willing to answer, perhaps? Let's put it that way.
Paul, I see you. Great. So your question, is it wise to use the word emotion for both positive and negative? Weren't the passions negative and changing, whereas the positives are ongoing states? So yes, the passions, so the negative emotions were changing and dependent on external conditions, whereas the good emotions are ongoing states which you cultivate for yourself. I know we've talked more about that in the past hour since you asked the question. Did you have any other follow-ups, Paul, that you wanted to ask about?
I suppose it's about vocabulary, really. I know linguistics is your field, so it was about whether it's helpful to use different terms, the positive and the negative, rather than sort of mixing them into one pot of emotions.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Chris Gill just wrote a book last year called Learning to Live Naturally. I think it's kind of like his magnum opus about Stoicism and living in agreement with nature, you might say. He talks a lot about emotions, and he translates them as motives, which I really like. This Greek word horme, because it's usually translated as impulse, like we have an impulse that compels us to do something. I really like how he translates it as motive, because that ties it to our motivation and also to the word emotion. So you might think about, obviously, yes, it is important what terms we use. Many of us, these are all translations of the Greek words. So sometimes they're translated into English in ways that we wouldn't necessarily, if we were just inventing a new term, we wouldn't translate them that way. Maybe we do come up with a new vocabulary, but I think this is a problem for Stoicism in general, like the word virtue, right? It has connotations of Victorian prudery, the word virtue. But when you actually translate it from the Greek, arete, it means excellence. So yeah, I think translation might be an issue. Do you have any suggestions, Paul?
No, actually, that's really helpful what you said, the idea of it being something that we're moved by, if you like, rather than the emotion itself being movable or changing. So yeah, I think that's really helpful. Thanks.
Okay, sure. Does anyone who's here have a further question or just a topic of conversation?
Thanks. I had a question. You mentioned early on about overwhelming emotions, either positive or negative. Just sort of what the general thought is, whether that kind of emotion is something that's within your control, it's something to work on, or whether that's generally something you should view as outside of your control and you try and be accepting or indifferent towards it.
So I do think the emotions that we're talking about, the good emotions, would never be uncontrollable and overwhelming in the sense that the bad ones are. So if you think about being angry, you're not reasonable. Someone couldn't sit you down and say, be reasonable now. You have to think this through. Your emotion is in control. So it's not, the positive emotions are not like that. They are very strong. I think of them. So the ancient Stoics used terminology for emotions such as bitings and contractions. So if you think about your physical experience, and this is one reason why Chrysippus located the seat of rationality in the heart, because you feel the physical sensations like your heart swelling, or we talk about our stomach and things like that. So the good emotions, I don't think you would have a comparable physical, like biting, swelling, elation, this kind of thing. You can feel your blood pumping, that kind. That's not what we're talking about. It is controllable and rational. I tend to think of the good emotions. Again, I'm not a sage, so I can't claim to have experienced these perfect emotions, but I tend to think of it more as an energy. So if you think of energy, it could be in the form of light, it could be in the form of heat, it could be in the form of an expansion of matter, right? These are all things that forms of energy can take. So rather than like kind of contractions and leaping out, like your heart leaping out of your body, it's more of just an energy that you can control. So it's a little hard to put into words, I think, but so the controllability and overpowering nature of negative emotions would not apply to the good emotions. Did that answer your question, or were you asking about something else?
Yeah, no, that does help. And that, yeah, I think you highlight a bit, there's that, yeah, separation between sort of the emotion itself and some of the physical or the bite sort of aspects to it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Brittany, so, 1 second, and Ron, don't jump on me yet. The Chris Gill's book, Learning to Live Naturally, Stoic Ethics, Modern Significance. I know you've got it, I've got it. That's an expensive book. It's an academic tome kind of thing, and someone did mention it here, and I know that that's true. Now, of course, let me first off say to someone, you can decide that's a thing you want to splurge on and do your thing. You can possibly get it through an interlibrary loan, by the way, if you're that kind of person, at least in the US, that's kind of where our libraries work. You can go to a library and say, you guys don't have this book, but maybe you can get it for me and I can borrow it and read it. But I think you're working on something else on that. Is that something you can talk about yet?
Yeah, I would say I did a chapter by chapter summary of this book on my Substack. So again, you can find me at Stoicism for Humans, and I broke down each chapter of Chris Gill's book, Learning to Live Naturally, partly because I know it's expensive and I wanted to help bring it to other people. And it's also kind of intimidating to read, 400 pages of scholarly work, but it's such an important book, such an excellent and well-presented kind of system of Stoicism that I thought it was really important to do that. So if you go back to, I think it was in January and February, I was doing that on my Substack, you can find that. Yeah, he is working on a more introductory version of that book as well. So you can look for that in the next year or so. That's, it's not near completion at the moment, but if you're looking for something right now, I can recommend those on my Substack.
Okay, super. All right, Ron.
Yes, thank you. Brittany, I just wonder if you can speak to ambition in terms of, accomplishing things in life, and being being creative and ambitious, but also if you can speak to a different topic of dealing with chronic illness and upcoming death. Nice, cheerful subject.
Well, it's an important subject, and the Stoics certainly did not shy away from it, and they encourage us to not shy away from it as well. Our 21st century Western culture, we tend to kind of bury those topics and not think about them. And the Stoics really encourage us to think about that every day. So I can direct you to a couple of really good resources on chronic pain. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Duff Lambros, Karen Duffy. She lives with chronic pain, and she has written a couple of different books about it that I can highly recommend. I think Backbone might be the place to start. Backbone by Karen Duffy. Her most recent one, Wise Up, was letters to her son, but she talks about pain in that as well. So she has a lot of really good resources on that. For Memento Mori, most of the books on Stoicism will tackle this topic. I believe William Irvin's A Guide to the Good Life, he talks about
death. Very good book.
Yes. And then, of course, all of them talk about it. Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus. So what I like to do if I'm interested in a certain topic is I'll just go through all of the ancient books and pull out my favorite quotes. So you can handwrite them just to have that physical memory of them and help them to sink into your psyche. It's a spiritual exercise. You can type them in. I have a spreadsheet of my favorite quotes. So the more you can work with those specific quotes from the ancient authors, I think the more helpful it is.
And about the other thing of ambition and purpose and that sort of thing.
Right. So ambition for external things, the Stoics class things like money and wealth and social status and career promotions, all of these are external to us. They're indifferent. They're not within the realm of virtue. So there's something that normally we would work for. The Stoics recognize that they do have a certain type of value, that as people, we live in communities, we need to survive, we need to raise our families, this kind of thing. So they do have a certain type of value. However, we would never put those things above our quest for virtue. So if we had to choose between, being a good person and getting the deal at work in your job or whatever, you would always choose virtue. If it's going to conflict or be incompatible in some way with being a good person, you always choose to be a good person. If you can conduct your career and achieve success in a way that's compatible with virtue, that's fine. But, it can be difficult. There's always going to be some tension between values in those ways. So we just always have to be on the lookout, not to be overly ambitious for external things.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for that. All right, I got Rodrigo.
Yeah, just curious, I'd like to ask this question. And this Stoics has been really illuminating for myself and my wife. We've been doing this for a few months, and I view it as finding the best way to face our personal struggles, to go through life in the physical world, as I call it. And it does, I think, the best job at doing that, because it's objective, it's not biased. It tries to detach itself from a lot of prejudices and biases that limit other kind of philosophical streams, because all the abuse that has been done through history for anything that's powerful to be misused by the few. But I can't help but to ask, do anyone here knows about any books or any connections between Stoicism and Christianity? Because from my perspective, I think Stoicism does a great job at, again, living and overcoming our personal battles and being better human beings. But then I have also other beliefs that take me beyond the realm of even like the Stoics would say, right? The Stoics originally considered physics together with metaphysics, right? They didn't distinguish between the two, and I can get it. There were no MRIs or nuclear machines back then, so they lumped it all, right? But now we're starting to draw a distinction between the physical world as we understand it, as we grow into it, and other things, other sciences, quantum mechanics that make it understand other things, and what is not, that is more in the realm of information. But at any rate, is there anyone here that knows or has heard about a connection or to continue our growth into beyond the physical world between Stoicism and Christianity?
The first one that springs to mind is a book by Kevin Vost, who actually recently passed away, but he spoke at Stoicon. He was a really good person. His book, The Porch and the Cross. And that's the only one I know of that specifically addresses Stoicism and Christianity. I'm sure there are others, so other people may contribute. Okay. There we go. And I'd just like to mention that a lot of people do successfully combine Stoicism with their religious tradition, whether it's Christianity, Islam, Judaism. So a lot of people are working in that area. You might be able to find some other like-minded people. There might be a Facebook group for people who have similar beliefs. So definitely look around, because there are a lot of people who are Stoics and Christians at the same time.
Let's see, I got one more hand raised. Let's take that, and then I think we're going to put a ribbon on this. Is it Serhi? I don't know. Not sure what I'm looking at.
Hi, yeah, it's Serhi. Thank you for everything for this today meet conversation. And I want to ask a simple question, Brittany. What is your favorite Stoic practice and why?
Oh, my favorite Stoic practice? Well, I guess I would have to say, apart from, of course, having these lovely discussions with all of you, because this is a Stoic practice, right? I mean, conversations with like-minded people who can encourage each other, that's really important. And it was considered important by the ancient Stoics. But apart from that is just reading as much as possible, because it's something you can do anytime, anywhere. You don't have to have somebody else with you. There are a lot of books available, and I have a kind of a cycle I go through from Seneca to Marcus Aurelius to Epictetus. So just keeping it at the top of your mind, 5 minutes a day. That's all you need to do.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, the thing is, of course, Seneca says, surround yourself with this good reading, right? Dive deep into this thinking. And there's nothing that has infected my life like just regularly reading and committing to my mind these ideas. And the more you do it, the more you realize that it's just everywhere. My kids are tired of hearing me come up with something. Well, there's a quote for this, and part of it is just that it's in my head. It is so deeply in my, and the only way it got there was to keep reading it all the time. And everyone talks about, well, I really love the meditations, and I love the meditations, but I've now read maybe 5 different translations of the meditations, and it is great to keep having those ideas kind of roll back into my head. I really love it. I asked John Sellers about what his favorite translations was, and it was funny. He loved the Penguin. And I was like, oh my God, I'd read all of them, but the Penguin, I think. And so then I read the Penguin. I was like, I get it. It's charming. It's absolutely lovely. But having those ideas in your head and putting them in your head every day and of course, using them as an opportunity to practice in the real world is just something that I love. All right, friends, it's high noon, just about 3 minutes to the top of in the world in which I live. And I love you, and I'm glad to see you. And thank you for being part of this. Would you do it again?